Hey everyone, I am Laura Ricciardoni. You are listening to A Taste for All Seasons. This is a cooking, it's a cultural, an inspirational way really in exploring the world of seasonal eating and seasonal living. I believe when we live our lives in balance with nature, we will thrive. Everything that we humans have needed to survive and thrive has been provided by the natural world around us. Food, right? Water, medicine, which is derived by plants, the good stuff anyway, and even natural cycles such as climate and nutrients. It's a pretty perfect system. I think that sometimes the trick is to align ourselves with Mother Nature and the seasons and to, pay a little attention to that. I think that is the tricky part. You can now listen to A Taste for All Seasons podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts whenever you're craving some seasonal inspiration. And I will always share a new recipe that I continue to develop as the seasons continue, see what ingredients are coming up, and I will be sharing an incredible salad later that might surprise you. So stay with us for that. All episodes are on my website, lauraricciardoni.com, along with many seasonal gluten-free recipes. And if some of you missed the last show, I mentioned that I have a fantastic spring ebook that's on my homepage. It's a giveaway with a few recipes to rebalance our gut and our daily energy for this time of the year. It's really a very informative book. Well, happy spring, everyone. This is a creative time of the year for both cuisine and for creativity, right? Gone are the winter foods and bring on those light and bright flavors that I'm so excited about that include the spring vegetables like ramps, spring leeks, green garlic. I love the mellowness of green garlic, and it's not there for very long, which actually makes it even more special. And then there's strawberries, rhubarb, some raspberries, so much to look forward to. This is a very energetic time. It's full of new beginnings. It can really be a perfect time to start a new project or even to breathe some new life in one that may have become stale. I recently did that, something that is close to my heart that I've been working on for a long time, but I did kind of put some new energy into and a little bit more focus, and really just the universe aligned itself with some opportunities and things got moving a little bit again. So I really just experienced that firsthand. I thought I would share that. It's also a very visual time, so do let the seasons inspire and revitalize your creativity. I know some of you are thinking, I'm not really creative. People say that to me sometimes, and every one of us has a creative side, but it can be expressed in so many different ways. We're not all wonderful painters or writers. You could be an innovative thinker, cooking, artistically, just to name a few. And speaking of the artistic process, we will be having a conversation with artist Therese Desjardin and how she connects her creative process to the seasons of life, right? Depending on where we are, there is an ebb and flow to energy, and it's really could be very exciting. So if you are a curious cook and a curious person, you're going to want to stick around. So go grab a cup of tea or coffee and get ready for some inspiration and some ideas, little tips on how to connect your creativity to the seasons. Before I introduce you to our guest, let me tell you a bit about her. Therese's visual vocabulary comes from years of reflecting upon and studying both nature and art. Her work is layered, sensual, it's refined and expressive. A calmness pervades many of her pieces over an energized foundation of brushwork. Her artwork embodies a fresh synthesis of classical and contemporary themes and techniques. Her most recent works were shown in galleries in Madrid, New Mexico. She had a solo show called The Feminine Soul in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Therese has spent over 2 decades in fine dining, working with some very passionate seasonal chefs, and she has cooked for many of the clients. That's quite a creative resume. So welcome, Therese. Thanks for coming on.
I'm so glad to be with you here.
Wonderful. I'm going to kind of jump right in. How did you become a painter?
Well, I've always been an artist. I can't remember not being an artist. So there's a story of me painting what I called ghosties on the wall when I was 2.
Wow.
And so it started very young. I thought people need a little more decoration in their homes.
Did you paint your bedroom? Did you have murals on your bedroom from a young age that you did yourself?
No, I didn't. No, I wasn't allowed to do that,
Oh, yeah,
unfortunately.
really? Okay. There's the parenting, right? So I love when I was reading a little bit in your bio that what's really inspired you is being in nature, a big part of it. Do you think giving our attention to the seasons is an important thread in connecting to that creativity? What was that like for you? You know, connecting nature, being in nature, that brought some, it had an impact in your painting, you as an artist.
Well, I feel nature. So while I'm very, very visual, I have a very acute feeling sense. So I feel energy. I feel energy move. I feel when it flows. I feel when things are dormant, when they're energized. So while I see things on through the eyes in a visual way, I have a very profound connection with almost how the chi is flowing. If things are invigorated, if they're having a difficult time, if they're just dropping or the energy's dropping, if it's coming back up again. So as I walk in nature, as I contemplate and reflect on nature and subject matter to paint, I really am tuning in to what is happening in the moment in nature and ride that wave.
I love that. And it makes me think like right now we're in spring, which is an invigorating time, could be a time for new beginnings. Is this time of the year inspiring anything for you, whether it's in painting or just creatively?
So it's one of my favorite times of year, probably the spring and the autumn, although I love all the seasons. But the spring, in the springtime, you can still see the structure of trees, kind of the bones of the hill and the geography. And then you see this blush of growth that starts and these wisp of colors. The weather's changing. So it's kind of going back and forth and oscillating and coming into a new rhythm. And I feel like kind of riding that wave is really how we change, how we grow, and how we express. So it's a really exciting time to be creative.
I agree with you. And of course, I'm going to bring it back to food for a moment. And it just reminds me of when I get inspired this time of the year and new ingredients are starting to come up, different color, different textures, which definitely kind of has you move in a particular direction. So when you and I were talking, you also shared your time working with a family-owned Italian restaurant in Connecticut with a very passionate seasonal chef, and that it was one of your favorite jobs. So why was that? And did that time affect your painting? Did it overlay into other areas of your life in a creative way?
Oh, it did. And that's part of what I loved about it was, well, in that particular job, everything was aesthetic. We had a beautiful setting. We had music. And then we had this introduction to I introduced the food as though it were a person. And we had all of these exquisite seasonal dishes. So, and then I would paint and do artwork during the daytime and then do that in the evening. So it was really a wonderful creative balance for me.
And what was the name of the restaurant? I remember you telling me. Is it still there, the restaurant?
No, and well, it's there, but the people that own it finally sold it. The name of the restaurant was Cavies. Steve and Kate Cavaniero owned it, and they were delightful. We had a bit of a family atmosphere. It was eclectic. We had people from France, from Spain. We had quite quite a group of people working in that area. And Steve was just a dear. I remember him cooking risotto. He would wait to cook risotto every spring when the truffles would come.
Mm.
And so he would get these truffles from France, and they would be in a little wooden box, and they were $190 an ounce.
Yeah.
This was years ago too.
Wow,
and
yeah,
so
he would, now.
They're a lot more than that. So he would come out, and he had been making this risotto and be walking through the dining room with fresh truffles, and and then adding truffles, he'd say, "Would you like some extra truffles on your dish?" And people didn't really understand a lot of it. Oh, yes. And so he'd start shaving the truffles, and I would be thinking, oh my goodness, there's $10, $20, $30. Because I knew I had to give him the check. But the whole experience was absolutely delightful, and they were delightful. I had never been in a place that had taken such care with food. And his restaurant, along with one other I worked in Connecticut, were really in more of a European fashion and tradition.
When was this? What decade are we in?
This was in 2000, the 2000s.
Okay, so
2000.
Not that long ago, although time is moving by, isn't it? So,
and the 1990s too, yes.
And then after that, did you move to Santa Fe? After that experience from Connecticut, you went to Santa Fe? Was that your?
Yes, after Connecticut, I moved to Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I've been there for the last 15 plus years.
I know, which is wonderful. We had that in common because we were there even at the same time. Did you go to the farmers market when you were in Santa Fe?
Oh, yes. And so Santa Fe, I heard someone describe it as this close to a third world country as you could get in the United States. And I think there's a degree that's truth to that. And so there were festivals and outdoor markets, and it was very, very eclectic. In fact, the majority of the population was not Anglo, so it was a very, very diverse culture, which I loved.
Yes, as did I.
Yes,
which opens doors up, I think, for creativity. Like the Native American culture there. Did that culture in Santa Fe affect your painting at that time in your career?
Absolutely. So I love the Hispanic art, but in particular the Native American art, and then the landscape, which is it's absolutely stunning. It is the land of enchantment. It's beautiful. The color saturation, because there's not a lot of atmospheric moisture there, so the colors are all very, very vibrant. And then you see these patterns, I think more so than you do in a lot of places, because it is the desert. So you see really the bones of the mountains, you see the spotted pinions, you see the skyscape is enormous. And the native culture then, which sort of reduced a lot of this natural geometry down to symbols, their own geometry, their own meaning, was very, very inspiring. I can see how it arose in them to perceive this in nature.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely miss Santa Fe a little bit, but, I have it all in my mind's eye and it's there. So are you painting now? Are you painting these days?
I am, yes.
Okay. Are you working on some new piece that, I know you're in Asheville right now, North Carolina, and has being here inspired some new work for you, or?
Well, it's going to. I've been waiting for the spring to come, and I'm going to go out and sketch and take some photographs. I have painted in plein air. But right now, I'm finishing up a series of Indigenous women that I've been working on in the landscape out west. So I'm still working on that series, which I will be working on a painting later today.
And you and I, when we were talking just, amongst ourselves, we were talking about the seasons of life, and where we are at this time in our life and how, there's an ebb and flow to creativity. I don't always feel creative. I don't always feel like developing, a new recipe or whatever it is, writing. And, to just really kind of honor that. And would you say, you and I are kind of, we call it the third act in life, right? where we get to, which is kind of could be juicy and nurturing, and we have a lot of wisdom there, so we get to do it in a different way. And Do you allow yourself to take the time with those different seasons
Well,
that we all have?
absolutely. And what you're bringing up, and I've had the pleasure of living in a number of different geographic areas in the United States. But I am in my mid 60s now, and I've moved from Santa Fe, so I'm on totally new ground. And so in a number of ways, how I live, where I live, the friends I have, but also in my artwork. And I really feel that it's a time of, certainly COVID seemed to deepen the process of sort of shutting what doesn't work anymore,
Yeah.
and allowing it to go. And I've really, during COVID, I was painting quite actively. And I allowed myself probably more than I had in a long time, because in the artistic process, you get a way of expressing things like you do in anything in life, a series of dance moves, a way of cooking, you sort of start building and building and building. And so I allowed that process to really break down for me and kind of fall away. And I became much more experimental, where I was involved in the process. And so I would paint every day, and then just kind of allow myself to just paint, to be in whatever space I was in. And sometimes in the past, especially, I think I might have been horrified, like, oh my gosh, what have you done today? And I just let that happen. I let myself paint in new ways, experiment in new ways, and be in the process and not worry about it. And I feel this is so I'm entering a new era.
Yes.
Picasso talked about that. It takes a whole lifetime to become an artist. I'm sorry, it takes a season to become an artist, but a whole lifetime to learn to draw or paint like a child again. And so that's what I'm allowing myself to do, is kind of find a new footing, find a new language, and maybe take a bit of this and that, whatever I feel like, really coming into an open, empty space and allowing what I decide to put together and integrate into my artwork and into this third act that I'm now embarking upon.
And that's the beauty of it. We don't need that approval so much anymore, and allowing oneself to make those mistakes. One of my favorite quotes is that if we're not making mistakes in life, we're not living our life. There's always going to be something where it might be a little less than perfect. And we have to, for myself, get that perfectionist out of the room, which is less and less as I'm on the planet a little bit longer, have a little bit more wisdom with that. What's one bit of advice, Therese, that you would give your younger self in hindsight, in the process of creativity? Like, what would you tell her? What would you tell her?
And I would tell her, just trust yourself and go for it. And even going through college, in many ways, it actually didn't help me in my creative process. And I was unfortunately a really good student, so I'm paying attention and I'm taking all this in, and it really puts I put more critics in my mind than were there before. And I understood how things would be looked and viewed historically and viewed by the critics. And I really had to move beyond, which I have. I've been working with that, to move beyond. It's like you have to really not let those voices and those opinions stop you. But I can see now, and I'm attempting to really sort of resurrect this, just go for it and be in your own flow, get in your own flow, be in your own creative zeal. Find what you love, find what moves you and speaks to you, and then go with that. Because I think, in a way, art is visual. Fine art is a visual music. And so you have to let that express. You have to let your own music come forth.
Makes me think, when I'm cooking, ingredients, which I only eat with the seasons, and depending on what's at the market and what's in front of me, that is what will tell me what's going to be on the menu. I'm not forcing it, or, you might have an idea in your head, but the ingredient is going to tell you what to do. I remember you telling me about that. You went foraging with your friend and nettles, I think, and dandelions, and made this incredible soup with sweet potatoes and nettles. It's like whatever you gathered foraging really inspired the soup, right? It's kind of what you're talking about.
So moving here from the desert, there's just so much vitality and growth and greenness. So
Yeah.
I've been making dandelion pesto and nettle soup. I got some nettles again today. I'm using whole new ingredients, a whole new repertoire of ingredients. And especially right now, we have shortages
Yeah.
um,
Challenging.
and it's a little more challenging to find the fresh food. So I'm with a dear friend of mine, and there's a garden here. And so we forage, we're planting. I was planting some things in the backyard. We have a big garden going. And so that's just been a source of delight and life, just being in that life.
And I think more and more people, I know a lot of people I talk to are going back to that place of getting back in the garden, wanting to grow some things, and just be in that place of, because it's very nurturing and that stimulates our creativity in so many ways. What was your biggest challenge, would you say, as an artist? Like, if you had to pick something that kind of got in your way that you could shed some light on to maybe people that are listening, that are looking to have a path, whether it's painting or whatever the modality is.
Well, being an artist, and I worked as a professional artist also, you really have to. First of all, art has been a mirror for me. So I see exactly where I am psychologically, emotionally, energetically, psychically, spiritually. It's all right there.
Yeah.
I can
Yeah.
tell if I'm on or if I'm off. But also it's been a way and it's been an avenue for me just to move. I have this little saying of move the energy. I just move the energy. And once I get moving and into it, something else just finds its own groove. And so I think that's so critical. It's critical in art, but it's critical in life to find your own energy when you're in your own groove, when you're lining up and aligned in yourself and you can feel that flow. It's a place where I have been able to achieve the flow state at times. So I'm always seeking to do that, because when I do, it's like cooking, the exact right thing to put in, when you're painting, I know just the right move, just the right color, like everything is golden. And so to operate on that level, so I've made a great effort to use art really as a vehicle to get into that flow state and express something even beyond words and concepts in myself. And so then to maintain that, you were asking what's the most challenging thing? It's to be able to create a life where that is part of my life, and not let other things get too loud or too invasive or too dominating,
Yes.
too negative,
Yes.
too fear-inducing. And so it is a way, and I'm quite active. I go out in nature, but I've always been an athlete to some degree. And so if I kind of keep the eating, the exercising, the creativity, if I keep these going in myself, and I do have spiritual practice and meditation also, and contemplation. If I keep these going, I will come back to balance no matter what is happening in my life.
Yes. And I think having those exercises, those little tips, if you will, for success to lay the groundwork out. Because I know if I don't do my exercising or my breath work in the morning, it's a very different day. And just getting back to what you were saying earlier, kind of what I'm hearing is that we have to really kind of get out of our own way, let the ego part of ourselves kind of go, and just it's going more inward than outward into the world, where it tells us so many different things or judgments or whatever. So am I hearing that right from you?
Yes. And I think going back to this, because what can happen in any of these practices is we get a concept in our mind or some idea of what is perfection or what's the right way, or, somewhere we're going into, and I was pretty good at it, but I've really understood, like I've really gone off course if I let those kind of conceptual bars start guiding me, rather than to be in the energy of myself, my own life. So the flow in me is going, and to trust that, and to not have an opinion about it, and to not have an opinion about sort of, because there is a process where we kind of can unwind and get our energy back into alignment. So if we seem to be painting a little chaotically or whatever needs to move through us, to just allow that to happen
Yes.
without judgment, because it might be something brand new coming in. So I go back again and again to like a beginner's mind to attempt to not have an opinion about everything and try to see things with fresh eyes over and over, like in the moment. Just and if I'm not even sure in the day, I'll put it away and I'll look at it the next day or the day after that. I don't need to have this kind of controller in the mind, directing the show, so to speak, coming to a judge or this is this or that is that, or a lot of that comes from our conditioning, from our training, from how other people have perceived things. And so to try to get back, so we're really in and experiencing our own perception in a vital way and following, like, oh, okay, I'm in the flow now. I'm in the stream and it's kind of moving me in somewhere totally new, and I'm exploring and I'm expanding. And you can feel when this growth tip in yourself is active, because it's a really, active kind of vital experience. So it's whether you're tasting food or suddenly something's emerging on a canvas. It's a very similar kind of internal experience.
Words of wisdom, Therese. And tell us how folks can find you. Do you have a website?
I do. I have a website for my artwork. It's my name, Therese Desjardin Studio.com.
You want to spell that just in case?
And it's the French spelling. I don't speak French. My family was French Canadian a way back, but I have a French name, which actually means of the garden, which I love that name. I'm named after Saint Therese too, who was a flower of the garden. So there I am, looking for some friends to hang out with in kind of a beautiful space. But the spelling of my name is Therese, and the last name is Desjardin Studio. So they dropped the S there, but there's my name.
Any final words for our listeners? We're going to just kind of wrap it up in a moment. Any last words?
I think I know for me, there can be a big difference when I'm anticipating the change in it, because I feel that talking about the seasons and the change and the creativity in the seasons, I feel that we're at a really a tremendous collective shift where we're just involved in new territory, tremendous change. And so all of that adaptability, I know that I've cultivated. I would just encourage everyone to kind of be in a beginner's mind with things, experiment with things, see how it really feels in your body and in yourself, and how it's really affecting your life as we move forward. So we don't get so uncomfortable because it's not in the familiar lines. It's not in the familiar vantage point and perceptual viewpoint and judgment of, what's up and down and right or wrong or good or bad. To just move beyond that and be supple.
Very well said. A lovely way to just leave our talk here. And Therese, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a real delight.
Oh, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you.
Here are some tips that have inspired my creative process. Reading regularly, exploring new concepts. I read a lot of cooking books, recipe books, and I like to explore different methods of cooking because, there are just so many ways to do things, and it can be very inspiring to take ourselves out of our own comfort zone, if you will. I started writing again recently. Try recording your thoughts in a journal at the end of each day. Writing has really encouraged me to think a little more critically about my daily experiences and ideas. And, then you can just pick it up and look at it, another day, another week, and you never know what will come out of that. Exercise, of course, I know that's very basic, but it really gives me an optimal position to practice and apply creative thinking, particularly when I take a walk in nature. And cooking. You might have heard the expression chop wood, carry water. I translate this into chop garlic and spring onions. This is a phrase that stems from Zen Buddhism. And it goes something like this. Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. Simply put, it teaches us to slow down, be present. And speaking of cooking, it's time to share that spring salad that I was telling you about that is just pure perfection, in my opinion, and could be a meal in and of itself because it has a fair amount of protein in it. And that comes from our star ingredient, which are spring peas, English peas. And if you can't find them at the market, by all means, get some organic frozen sweet peas. I find them the sweetest. And blanch them in some, heavily salted water, boiled water for about 3 minutes. You want to keep a little texture to them. And then I would recommend putting them in an ice bath because it will stop the cooking and it also keeps the color really bright. I wouldn't exclude that little step. Then you'll add some baby arugula or chopped arugula if it's a little larger, some beautiful chopped cucumbers, and then some creamy fresh ricotta if you can find it. If dairy isn't your thing, cashew cheese, you can replace it with that. There are a lot of recipes online for cashew cheese, and it's really a lot simpler than you think. You just have to really soak your cashews, raw cashews overnight, and then it's pretty simple. Then I make a lemon vinaigrette. I like to add a little touch of monk fruit. I find that mellow sweetness balances the peppery, nutty taste of the arugula. But you could also add some balsamic vinegar, which has a little bit of sweetness to it, or apple cider vinegar, and just, of course, sea salt and taste your vinaigrette. And because there's few ingredients, I would use the best extra virgin olive oil that you could afford. Always want to keep a nice olive oil in your pantry. And then lastly, if you can find some wild strawberries, they're starting to come into season, or just organic strawberries. The wild strawberries are so sweet and they're smaller. They're absolutely delicious. And I just place them around the ricotta, a little hint of color, a little sweetness again. And voila, you have a delicious, healthy, kind of light spring salad that's very satisfying. Sometimes I want to kick it up a notch. I always keep a batch of dukkha, which is kind of a Middle Eastern condiment, if you will. It's nuts and seeds and mostly hazelnuts and pistachios. You could mix it up a bit. I toast some sesame seeds and coriander and cumin, a little salt, few grinds in the little food processor, and just adds a little texture. And it does, like I said, it kicks the flavor up a notch, but I would just experiment with it. For the full recipe, visit my website, lauriericciardoni.com. I'd like to leave you with a final thought. Food for thought. Make your food with love, with patience, and by hand, with whole ingredients. Perhaps the most basic form of preparing a meal for loved people can be one of the most therapeutic, particularly in a culture increasingly mechanized, right? The rhythm of a natural process can be a kind of rebirth to a tethered soul or a stressed soul. And if at first it doesn't turn out the way you would have liked it to, you can try again tomorrow. I'm going to just give you a little touch on the history of peas. It's one of the oldest cultivated crops. That wild plant is native to the Mediterranean region, and ancient remains dating to the late Neolithic period have been found in the Middle East. I found that interesting. Well, I hope you got a little kitchen inspiration today and just some inspiration on your creative process. You're listening to A Taste for All Seasons, and I hope you will continue to join this podcast as we cook our way through the seasons and live our lives through the seasons. Until next time, buon appetito.